Hello, good evening, everyone. Thank you all for coming out tonight. I'm Andrew Crabtree, the Director of Community Development for the City of Santa Clara. And this is one of a series of events that we've been hosting around the theme of placemaking. Tonight's topic, as I believe you probably all know, is art and the art of placemaking. And we have a great panel here. And we have Jill Myers from the Triton Museum. She's been here 25 years. She's the executive director, and she's very graciously agreed to moderate our panel. So we're going to start with some initial presentations and then some Q&A time amongst the panel, and then we'll have opportunity for audience participation as well. I'll make a note that tonight's presentation is going to be live streamed on both Facebook and YouTube, so it's recorded. Folks can view it later. So consider yourself the studio audience, and this is also being broadcast out for the community as well. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Jill.
All right, thank you everyone. Thank you for coming tonight, and thank you for everyone who's watching. Hopefully we got a good crowd watching us live as well. We have three wonderful speakers tonight, so starting on your left and then moving left to right, and hopefully when this light I can see. We have Marie Applegate. She's a resident of Santa Clara, and she recently moved into Santa Clara. She's an artist, and she's worked on a lot of projects in the city of San Francisco. So she'll be here to talk about a lot of the experience she's had outside of the area and ideas, I think, of what we can bring in here locally. Then moving in the middle, we have Carrie Adams Hapner, and she's the Director of Cultural Affairs for the city of San Jose. So she will be talking to us about a lot of the projects, I think, here locally and also throughout the country. And then we have also Kathy Aoki, who is the Associate Professor of Studio Art and also the Chair of the Department of Art and Art History at Santa Clara University. And she is also a resident of Santa Clara. So we have a lot of everyone local people who can share with us. So let me start with a little bit more on, let's see, sorry for my. So we're going to start, our first speaker will be Marie, and so I'm just give you a little bit more background about her, and then we'll move through the panel, and then like Andrew said, we'll have, do a little Q&A, and then we'll open it up to the audience after each speaker presents. So Marie primarily distills Stanford's Center for Compassion, Altruism Research and Education, compassion cultivation training, and other theory-based findings, and translates them into large-scale, playful, interactive public experiences and installations that promote pro-social behaviors. The majority of her work has been in the epicenter of transitioning neighborhoods in San Francisco. As the juncture of the old and new lays much tension that could be relieved. As she's looking at her work, Marie believes the civic engagement through playful, interactive public art can have a subtle yet powerful impact, disarming tensions while presenting opportunities for the disconnected to reconnect. With her education and support from and continued alliances with Stanford, CCARE, the Exploratorium, Hive Global Leadership in the City of San Francisco, she aims to bring alive the deep research from those organizations to further progress their mission. Maria is seeking to connect and collaborate with community activists, civic leaders, academics, sponsors, and entrepreneurs, and she's interested in big impact civic engagement projects that focus on a trifecta of creativity, compassion, and connection, which are supported and sponsored by foundations, private funds, and/or cities. She's also available to create temporary or permanent site-specific experiences and installations as a means to build a more playful, creative, and compassionate culture. So she has a lot of experience around that in San Francisco, and I think that's what she'll talk about, of how that can connect with something that we do here, down here in the South Bay. And so everything that the music she does are for the love of life and the love of her life, and not the love of life, and her two children. So, so please, Marie, if you want to come up and start.
I think I'm going to walk over on this side. Is that okay for the camera? Hello. Hi, everyone. Thanks for making it this evening. Do I just say slide when I need the slide to change? Okay. Okay. So this is kind of how I learn best, and I think how people learn best as well. And I'm just going to read this. It says, "Tell me and I'll forget. Show me and I may not remember. Involve me and I will understand." And so that's kind of why I went into civic engagement using public art. Slide. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the outline. So I'm going to talk about my upbringing, the summer of 2013, some projects that I have worked on and am currently working on, and general overall vision. Slide. So upbringing. Can we fully open that? Because there's text at the top. Cool. Thank you. So I was fortunate enough to have attended the International School Manila in the Philippines. And there I was in the classroom setting and was surrounded by people from all over the world. So there were usually about like 12 nations on average in each classroom. And it was really a powerful experience to see that we were all able to connect and learn and grow and play together. And we were also taught to celebrate each of our religious beliefs and cultural beliefs. And so it was a very celebratory, focused way of learning about each other's cultures and building empathy and compassion in that way. And so that's kind of the foundation of a lot of the work that I do. Slide. So I think we heard compassion a lot when we're talking about the work that I do. And so Stanford's CCARE is the Center for Compassion, Altruism Research and Education. And in the summer of 2013, I attended the Stanford Nonprofit Management Institute. And there I met Jim Doty, who's the founder of CCARE. And he totally changed my life and is now one of my mentors. And so I really look to the work that Stanford is doing in that arena. And as Jill mentioned, I distill and translate their work into interactive public experiences and installations. Yes, please. And one more. So in the summer of 2013, simultaneously, the same time, I came across Free Space, which was, sorry. So Free Space was the first placemaking project that I accidentally did. I actually didn't know what placemaking meant at that time. But in hindsight, it makes sense that all these projects that I have been doing have been in the placemaking sphere. So Free Space, we took over this underutilized warehouse in San Francisco for $1 for 1 month. And they let us do whatever we wanted with this warehouse. So this was I think, something like 40,000 square foot warehouse. And so what we did is we opened it up to the communities, and we invited them to come in and kind of create whatever they wanted in the space. The only rules were no money was allowed, no monetary exchange, no drugs or alcohol. And so what really came about were these beautiful murals that everyone created together. We had a garden project that was donated to us. We had a lot of workshops that people spontaneously taught as well. And so we had people from all walks of life coming into the building. We had kindergarten classes, we had homeless veterans, we had tech workers, artists, and we also had the VC millionaires coming in, and they were all there working side by side, creating all these beautiful pieces of art together. Slide. So that was the summer of 2013. And 2014, free space got picked up by the city of San Francisco, and I continued to do that work. In between that, I did this project called Activate MacGuffin, and we took over this underutilized parking lot and kind of did the free space thing there as well. And so just created an opportunity, a platform to invite local organizations and local groups to come and create place there. Slide. So we had someone donate this container, and that became a community project. And so that was painted by people just walking by going, cool, what is that? And we said, well, why don't you come in and join us? And so they felt a sense of ownership for that project and for that space. And so that's how we started to pull people in, is we asked them to participate. Like, hey, we're doing this thing. Do you want to come do it too? You're right here. And so we had a lot of local members come participate. And it was also en route to the mission area, so we had a lot of hipsters and tourists, and a lot of really great projects that came out of this. Slide. So, programming. Oh, right, this is the old version. Okay, programming. So why did I choose to do these projects? So really, when I got involved in this, again, it's like that idea of creating opportunities for people to come together and create together. And what I learned is that there is this, I think, innate desire for people to have a space where they can collectively come together. Slide. The next couple of projects, one is, there you go. That's okay if you can't press play. So basically, I created this large-scale installation that invited adults to feel like they were 3 years old again. So I scaled it up. Like, there's a refrigerator for a large cookie jar with large cookies. And so the idea was that if we adults physically feel like we're 3 years old again, we might psychologically regress to a time when we were pre-socialized and more creative and more compassionate. And it was a lot of fun to see like these businessmen walking around and like literally jump up on the chair and just like start swinging their legs and like aiming for the cookies and just walking away with this big smile and connecting with others in the area. So that was part of the Market Street Prototyping Festival, which I may or may not have time to talk about a little bit later. Slide. This installation is called the Technicolor Zen Garden. And that's my baby, Max. And my partner, Sean. And so this was taking the space over by the Asian Art Museum and creating this opportunity where there's a lot of high traffic, but it's a thoroughfare. And so we're like, how do we make it sticky? How do we get people to stay and want to come and participate and do something? So this was one of the installations that we had on that site. Slide. And then this is another one called Together Let's. And this is a lot more simple concept, and it's basically taking Polaroid photos of people and asking them the question, together let's, and have them fill that in themselves. And so we had people do it by themselves, we had people do it in couples and groups, and we also put strangers together and see what kind of answers that they come up with. Slide. So why did I do the installations? So again, it's to distill like a lot of this scientifically based research into these interactive installations to try and broadcast the message and make it more accessible to people. And what I learned is that people really respond to collective moments of awe in terms of, one, learning, and two, connecting with each other and themselves in the space. Slide. So my current projects, I mentioned the Asian Art Museum earlier. So I invited artists to utilize this space outside the Asian Art Museum and come up with different ways to engage the community. And it's been pretty successful, but what I thought we needed more of is to create an artist in residence program so that the public could get to know the artists better and the artists can get to know the public. And so our first artist in residence is starting this June, and it'll be for one season, which is 3 months. And we're gonna rotate that and invite different local artists as well as different organizations. We have Academy of Art being the next organization / artist in residence. And so it'll be nice to see the students come out and work in the space as well. Slide. So this is more of the artists doing different placemaking engagement opportunities. Slide. I love this little girl's look on her face. She's like so determined. Slide. And so what this project, Civic Center Commons, basically the role at the Asian Art Museum has expanded to now include the Civic Center Plaza right in front of City Hall in San Francisco, as well as the United Nations Plaza. And those are fairly large spaces. And so the idea is to create some sort of artists in residence, organizations in residence, programming, opportunities for local artists and institutions and organizations to help create sense of place and space in these areas. And so they asked me to come up with a vision of the space, and going back to my roots of the international school, we're focusing on local global village and focusing on creating a plug-and-play infrastructure where it's easier for local organizations to do what they're already doing, but in public spaces. And so leverage our relationships with them and also celebrate what we have in common and our differences in those areas. Slide. So the vision, the overall vision of the work that I'm doing is threefold. One is to implement artists and local organizations and residence programs within cities, institutions, and organizations. Two, to get cities to not only consider 1% of new development budgets for public art, but 1% for public programming as well, because I think that they go hand in hand. Which leads to three is to inspire organic programming. And so part of art and programming is to create this feeling of having people come in these spaces organically doing their own things, whether it's small or big, or just the opportunity to feel safe in these spaces. Slide. Thank you. And I don't know if we have time, but did you want me to share the other stuff? Okay. I know. That's it. Thanks. Sorry.
Yeah, that's wonderful. No, I think we'll have a little time for more at the end, and people can ask questions. And because you talked about like developers and how funding can happen, and so those are definitely questions we'll open up to all the panels, so you can share a little bit more at that point. So, so next we have Carrie Adams Hapner, and as the Director of Cultural Affairs for the City of San Jose. Carrie leads the Office of Cultural Affairs. The mission of the OCA, I guess, to shorten it, is to champion the arts and the cultural vitality of San Jose's 1 million ethnically diverse residents and its visitors. She oversees services and programs in the areas of public art, creative placemaking, special events, cultural funding, cultural facilities, creative entrepreneurship, and the creative economy. She has led the development of significant cultural policy and programs, including Cultural Connections, San Jose's cultural plan from 2010 to 2020, cultural development goals for Envision San Jose 2040, and general plan updates for cultural funding portfolio investments and art, creativity, and culture. So a lot of things are happening in San Jose, a lot of planning looking forward, which is great. In 2014 and 2015, Carrie was named one of the most powerful and influential leaders in the United States nonprofit arts sector in Barry's blog, published by the Western States Arts Federation. Carrie regularly writes on and speaks at national conferences on a wide range of topics, from creative placemaking to cultural development to art and technology. From 2013 through 2016, she served as the chair of the United States Urban Arts Federation, which is comprised of the local arts agencies' executive directors of the 60 largest U.S. cities, and she has served as on the executive committee since 2010. She serves on the board of the Californians for the Arts and California Arts Advocates, and she's done that for 8 years, and she's a member of the Arts Table. Carrie, just a little bit more about her background. She earned her bachelor's degree from the UCLA, where she studied art history and business administration. She has a certificate in fine arts appraisal studies from the University of California at Irvine. And currently, she is pursuing a master's in liberal arts degree at Stanford University. So a lot of very wonderful experience. So thank you so much for coming, Carrie, and talking.
Thank you, Jill. And I just want to say it's really wonderful to be here at the Triton Museum. And I want to thank everybody for coming out and giving up your evening to spend some time talking to us about creative placemaking. So let me begin with the next slide. And just let's talk about why we're here, because we're here about making communities better. Placemaking is here to enhance communities. Next slide. So I wanted to just kind of give you a couple different perspectives on what is creative placemaking. So creative placemaking has a textbook definition that was actually published by the National Endowment for the Arts. And it's when cross-sector partners come together and help to transform neighborhoods through both socially and physically. And it's always around the arts. So the arts are at the heart of those strategies. And it's when you create a place where people come to be inspired. Next slide. So I think we all know a great city is a city of great places. And you can all think about places you've been in your life and why you want to go there. And it's because they have art and exciting, vibrant culture. So how do I know? This is the perennial question, actually. This is the question we're all kind of, swarming around. And it is, how do I know a great place when I see it? So it has that sense of vibrancy, and sometimes it's an intangible quality. That sometimes is something that it's hard to put your finger on, but there are actually a set of indicators that can tell you what vibrancy means. It's also when you notice that there's just a sense of there, right? And it's when the arts are at the heart of a set of strategies that can really change the momentum of a place, right? So you can see how places can change and evolve, and when you have art as part of your placemaking strategies, you can really make it distinctive and authentic. So every community has a set of placemaking assets and resources at their disposal. So I'm just going to name a few. First of all, of course, we have events and festivals. You have public art. You have nonprofit arts organizations. You have artists and creative entrepreneurs, and I call artists creative entrepreneurs because they're working across sectors. They're often their own sole proprietorship, and they're very much the backbone of any arts community. Also, you have commercial creative businesses, so those might be galleries, those are graphic design studios, those are architectural firms. A lot of different arts-based businesses exist in every community. You have, of course, cultural facilities like the one that we're in right now. Urban design is an important part of placemaking, as are cultural districts. And then, of course, economic development and incentives. So I'm going to talk to you about some of San Jose's placemaking initiatives. And I'm going to run through these fairly quickly, but I think a picture's worth 1,000 words. And I think it'll show you kind of what it is that we have underway within the city of San Jose And hopefully you've seen some of these works. So this is a work called Sensing You. It's by artist Dan Corson. It's at the underpass of the 87 on Santa Clara, right by the SAP Center. How many of you have seen it? Oh, awesome. All right. All right. How many of you know that you can change the display? Okay, that's your next thing you have to do when you go back. You can actually, you knew, all right. So we collaborated with a lab that was formerly with Google. It's called Niantic Lab. You ever heard of that game, Pokemon Go? Same people that created Pokemon Go created an online game called Ingress. And actually you can go to this piece and you can change it and you can activate it. You can change the colors, the frequency in which it's changing colors. It has a really beautiful spectrum of light. And it's on every night. So go and activate this work. And that's really a key trend that we're seeing in placemaking and public art. Things that are participatory and that you can change your experience. You can have your own unique experience. You can curate your interaction with this artwork. And another key part of this is that here in San Jose, because we are, at the core of Silicon Valley, art and technology is definitely a sweet spot for us. We see that as part of our brand. And so we're constantly looking for new ways to really manifest that intersection between art and technology. So we did an initiative called Illuminating Downtown. And so we are looking at ways in which we can light up public spaces in downtown San Jose and really animate spaces from building tops, also as part of the pedestrian experience. So this is one of those works. Next slide, please. This is another work by Dan Corson. It's just adjacent to that one you just saw. It's called Sensing Water. It's also dynamic, and it changes, the light display changes according to the water levels in the adjacent Guadalupe River. Next slide, please. This is my favorite one. So you're all invited to come downtown and call this artwork. This is the number, so write that down. And you can change it by entering any 3 numbers and pressing 0, and then you hang up. Yes, take a picture of this, please. And it's so fun. You can actually, have your own art experience, and you can change it, and you're like the curator of this illuminated artwork in downtown San Jose. It's really, really fun. I used to live across the street, and every night I'd come home from work and I'd call it. It was really fun. This was a temporary artwork. So temporary installations are also a really great opportunity to foster creative placemaking because there's a lot of sort of freedom and liberty in doing something that's temporary, right? Which we saw. And this is a work called The Musical Swings, also sort of technology-based, and again, participatory and interactive. And what this is a musical swing set. There's 8 different swings, and you get on a swing, and each different swing has a different musical instrument. And the higher you swing, the higher the note. And when you swing in collaboration with somebody else, you're doing musical collaboration. You're making songs and you're making music. And it was just such a successful project. We had up for 3 months, and we're actually looking to engage the artist team to create a permanent installation. Next slide, please. That's okay. How many of you saw the swings? Any of you? Ah, cool. Wasn't it fun? It was like magical to go and experience that. This is a brand new piece. It's called Voxel Cloud by an artist called Brian Brush. And it is at the top of a private development. It's called The Piers, which is the southernmost part of our cultural district, our SoFa Cultural District. And this is comprised of thousands and thousands and thousands of LED lights. And it changes, it's dynamic. You see this color spectrum here. It goes through all colors of the rainbow. And you can see it from the 280 at night. It's actually best seen from the 280 at night, unless you have a droid. But actually, it's really beautifully, it spans the entire top of the building. And again, we're looking at ways in which we can punctuate rooftops and really animate the public realm. And so this is what we would call a beacon. This is a brand new piece that's going in right now. It's actually under construction. It's in our Sofa Cultural District, and it's called Urban Rooms. And it's created by an artist builder. His name is Teddy Cruz. And Teddy is creating a series of urban shade structure. So this is an urban park that was in major need of shade. And so we wanted to be activated everyday type of activation. So that's like part of the conversation that we should be having is, is placemaking episodic? Is it about events and festivals, or is it for the everyday? And increasingly, we're seeing that it's more important to think about planning for the public realm for everyday use, but also having flexible spaces that can be used for things like special events. So we have a series of urban rooms and also a stage. So that's okay. That's okay. Let's move on. That's good. So I mentioned earlier that artists are at the heart of any art community. To have creative placemaking, you really need to invest in your artist community. And as I mentioned, they're creative entrepreneurs, and they need resources, they need training, they need access to different types of networks. And so I would just encourage the city of Santa Clara as it's thinking about how to really grow its placemaking and its sense of community through the arts, that you really look at your investment in artists and creative entrepreneurship. So special events. Placemaking is about the permanent and the temporary elements in the public realm, but it's also about the day-to-day interaction and things that people are doing. So outdoor special events are a key strategy at really looking to animate public life. And we do that in San Jose a lot. We have over 500 event days a year, and we produce some special events like this one. It's called City Dance. And what happens during this 8-week series is, and by the way, you're all invited. It starts on August 24th. Please come. We're probably going to have disco that night because it's my birthday, and so come to my party. So this is called City Dance, and the first hour is a dance lesson. So we invite the people out. Come experience a dance lesson in a different genre, and then it's open dance for the rest of the evening. And so again, this emphasis on participation. So you have opportunities for creative self-expression, which helps connect people with themselves and with each other. Next slide, please. And as I mentioned, we have a very vibrant part of our downtown. It's called the Sofa District, which is home to different arts-based businesses, as well as nonprofit institutions like the Institute of Contemporary Art, the San Jose Stage, MACLA. There's a wide variety of different types of organizations there. And so thinking about what do you do? What are your strategies to help a cultural district really foster? And what are your anchoring institutions? So I'm just going to wrap it up by talking about sort of my philosophy when it comes to creative placemaking. So somebody asked me what it means to me, and I told you a variety of different definitions, but for me personally, placemaking is really about fostering a love of place. So it's a place where you want to go because you love it. And it's when the arts are at the heart of a set of strategies, where you go to a place where you can participate, and you can create, and you can connect. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. So our next speaker will be Kathy Aoki. I know it. Kathy Aoki. Sorry, I'm having trouble here. Kathy grew up on the East Coast in a Boston suburb, but came out to go to college at the University of Berkeley, and then that was followed by 2 years at Washington University in St. Louis, where he received her MFA in printmaking. As I mentioned before, Kathy currently lives in Santa Clara, and she is associate professor of studio art at Santa Clara University, as well as the chair of the art and art history department. Kathy has received many fellowships and commissions for her artwork. Her work can be found in some of the collections across the country, such as New York's Metropolitan Museum of Art. She's in San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, Harvard University Art of Museums, and New York Public Library, just to name a few of the places that you can see Kathy's work throughout the country. So we will have her come up and talk about her experiences.
Thank you for the invitation to be here tonight. I'm here as an artist that's made some projects, and also with my connection at Santa Clara University, where we are in the process of adding on to our arts district spaces. So what I have here on the screen are a picture of some of the tools I enjoy using. And as an artist, it's an interesting process to often work privately in a studio where no one can see you, and then turn around and suddenly everything is out there for anyone to comment, observe in any kind of way. So it's kind of a reversal of very private activity into a public space. So in this case, I'm showing these linoleum cutting tools. It's a relief printmaking process similar to woodblock printing, where I carve away at a material and then print from it. So in the next slide, you can see a picture of the plate. And so everywhere where it's lighter in color is where I've left behind, and then the other areas I've scooped out. And then in the next piece, this would be like this is a piece that I made for the city of San Francisco. They have a arts project that's called Art on Market Street, so it's a poster project. So I made this linoleum cut, so I carved the material, and then I rolled black ink onto the raised surfaces and printed it. And then that was transformed into a 4-foot by 6-foot poster, which you can see in the next slide. And these were reproduced and lined Market Street from the Embarcadero to Van Ness. So I made, I think, 6 different designs, and then they were reproduced. And these were only shown illuminated on the pedestrian side of the street. And my idea for this project was to spend a lot of time on Market Street and observe the businesses. And what I did was I observed random acts of kindness, and then I turned those acts into comic book style covers that showed champions of Market Street. So part of it was really observing the area and absorbing the architecture, but also hanging out until I saw nice things happen on Market Street, and then I could record them and reenact them and make this imagery. So a couple of the pieces here, this is the lost item returner. So like you drop something on Market Street and someone actually returns it to you. And then in the corner it says 94103, and that was the zip code of the area in which these events took place. And this is the daring door holder. I'm actually holding the door for someone. So that's a project I did around 2004. And then in my next slide also shows a community-based project that's more recent from the Palo Alto Arts Center. So they closed and then reopened this fantastic art center, and they invited artists to engage with the community to make a project. So what you're looking at is like a trompe-l'oeil mural on a wall. And so I made 2 peephole dioramas with teens from the area. And so on the left where it says Teen Circus, I made a diorama that kind of has a circus feeling and just kind of risk-taking and SAT test shoved in your face. And so when you look through the people, that's what you would experience. And then on the right was another scene with technology taking over. So I have one side of the interior here where you could see like what did it look like to look in, and you're about to like ride a bike into this kind of teens world. And part of my grant money I used to hire teens in the area. So not only did I meet with teens to brainstorm about the ideas in these pieces, but then I hired them and then they came to my studio and did production work, and then we made the installation. So that was, I think, 2011 or so. This is not a public art project, but it is an interactive project I made for the San Jose Museum of Art for an exhibition called Renegade Humor, and it was focusing on the museum's permanent collection of artists from the Davis area, so that had humor in their work. And so I was commissioned to make a new piece, and this is a political paper doll piece. So I made imagery by hand of linoleum cuts that got transferred into 3-foot tall laser cut steel, paper dolls, and then there was magnetic clothing that you could use to dress them. So in the next slide you can see a close-up of, so it's Arnold Obama, Sarah Palin, and Newt Gingrich, and they're all in similar poses so they can mix and match the clothing. And then in the next slide you could see how viewers at the museum could come and actually take clothing off of a magnetic panel, and it wasn't just like your refrigerator where you just stick the work on, and you actually had to like bend the tabs over, so you actually had to dress these people. So there's Sarah Palin getting a mama bear outfit, but I also had like a Hawaiian birth certificate skirt and coconut bra that I made for Obama, but it was the same size so that like Arnold Schwarzenegger could wear the coconut bra, so you could mix and match the clothing. And it kind of took a while for people to realize that they were allowed to touch artwork in that environment. Usually in that environment, you have to keep a distance from the work. So this was a different project, and it was a consumable project. So the pieces would get worn out, and I would come and fix them or reprint them and fix them up so that it continued through the life of the project, which was several months at the museum. Right, so there's the magnetic clothing on the right. I also want to show some of the work that's going on right now at Santa Clara University. This is outside of the Desaussé Museum, which Jill mentioned earlier. So that's our free museum of contemporary art. We also have an excellent collection of works on paper, and a California History Museum that a ton of grade school students have come and visited over the years. This is a new piece in front made by Fletcher Benton. So it's kind of exciting. Just in the last 2 years or so, a committee on campus has opened up the idea of artwork that is contemporary, living artists, and not necessarily speaking outright about, say, the Jesuit values or the Catholic values at the institution. So this is one of the first public art pieces that we had installed. And then the next slide shows an image by Brian Wall. So this is another sculptor who had an exhibition at the Desaussé, and now this piece is permanently installed. And although I don't have a picture of it, we also have a new Bruce Beasley piece in the area around the Desaussé Museum. So that's some of the public art that's happening. But in the next slide, I think we have 2 new pieces coming to the Art and Art History building. So I was fortunate enough to be chair when we opened our new Art and Art History building. So all that work that happened before, and then yay, I'm the chair, like right when it opened. So I enjoyed that moment of opening a fantastic space, which is open to the public, and we have a 3 times bigger gallery space that has exhibitions, so that's open to the public for free on weekdays during business hours. But we also have a sculpture garden next to it, and actually the donor for our building, Edward M. Dowd, insisted that 2 pieces of sculpture would activate the sculpture garden within a year of opening the building. So this is the plan. It's going to actually be delivered next week. This is a stainless steel piece created and designed by Roger Berry, who is an artist in the Sacramento Delta area. And he's made commissions all over the world, and there's some throughout the Bay Area as well. So this piece will be installed in our sculpture garden, and we just a week ago, in the next slide, installed this piece by Linda Fleming called Solar Flare. And this is Linda, crouched down in the foreground, and she is an artist whose studio was in Benicia, and she taught many years at the California College of the Arts. And she's working with students to install her piece. So that was wonderful. So these are pieces that the committee worked, researched a bunch of artists, tried to find work that aligned with the mission of Santa Clara and the mission of the Department of Art and Art History, and then engaged these artists to create these pieces. So I have just a couple of slides of what that looks like. And something that I enjoy about these pieces, and actually the Fletcher Benton and the Brian Wall, is that they're human scale. So there's an approachability to these pieces, unlike like a humongous piece, that you have a physical relationship, and as you walk around the piece, you see colors changing. So I walk by this piece every morning, and I'm very happy that it's there. This is our new plan. So the city, Santa Clara has purchased part of the road of Franklin Street, which is a small street that runs along the edge of the campus. It's 1 block south of Benton. And the street is going to be closed this summer. And so right now we're trying to figure out what can we do. So let's see here. In the center is an area where we could have a sculpture or some kind of art experience or light activating the space. And then to the right and diagonally is the sculpture garden where the 2 pieces are. And then above my hand is the Art and Art History building. So right in front of the Art and Art History building is going to be pedestrian, and then that will connect us with the Department of Music and Theater and Dance, and then a very short distance to COM, where digital filmmaking happens in the Desaussé Museum. So this is going to be a pedestrian entry to the Arts District on campus. And so we're in the brainstorming ideas about what is possible. So right now there's no specific art project planned, but we're building the infrastructure so we can consider future projects. And I'm part of a committee from all the arts groups on campus as well as the museum. And in the next slide, you can see we're, this is the sculpture garden in the upper right, and my building, Art and Art History, that's the Jesuit residence on that corner. And then this will all be closed off all the way down towards, I guess, the end is Lafayette Street. And then this way is, El Viso Street will be closed. And then what street is this, Chris? Oh. The Alameda. So we're thinking about what might be possible and would engage people as they walk through this street. So it's kind of a shortcut to the train station. And we're thinking, how can people have an experience? So this is an Anish Kapoor example where the artwork is interacting with the environment that you are in. And in the next slide, you probably have seen this in Chicago, like the giant chrome bean, where your image becomes active within the piece. So that's something that our committee is thinking about as we pursue options. And this is a piece by Anthony House. The idea of having kinetic sculpture as part of that scene is something we're also interested in. The next slide shows some pieces you might recognize from Palo Alto on California Street by a couple, Reed and Madden. So these are solar controlled, they open and close. So those are kinetic sculptures. And then as a last slide here, but not the least idea, the idea of having an exterior video wall or some way to have moving images activate the space. So this is in Washington, D.C. It's an entrance to their city center. But this is still one of the ideas that's exciting the group about what we can bring to campus. And although that's my last slide, I do want to mention that we also have many musicians and dance and theater are part of our institution. And the ability to make a space where events like that can happen, that you could just walk with your family and just sit down and experience some kind of performance in an art-friendly environment is something that we're considering as well. So that's it. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. So we're going to just open up. I have a few questions to start with, and then we can also open up to the audience. The first question is kind of looking at is for the artists, but certainly Carrie, feel free to jump in. I don't want you if you have some thoughts on it, but kind of just as an artist, what do you see as the role of art in supporting and fostering the building of community? So how does art do that? And you know what I'll do? I was going to say I have two microphones, so I can kind of keep one and you can pass it around. So hopefully I won't have to. Yeah, we can absolutely do that. So I don't know if Marie, did you want to, or if anyone had an idea of kind of how you see artists supporting community and fostering it. So if you have any thoughts? Okay. Yeah, and I'll turn it.
So
that's true. Here you go.
I think that we're all here because we believe that the arts can foster community. And the kind of work that I'm most familiar with in doing just that is the ephemeral installations and experiences. I think that when there is a kind of schedule that is set, let's say like a weekly installation or experience, then there's a beat that's created. And so when there's a beat that's created, then you start building up a community and an audience. And they start to expect and want to see things in this space and maybe even contribute to it. And so I think that that's where art can really help build community and sense of place.
Thank you. Any other thing you want to add on that? Or?
Well, when I've done projects, I feel that my role of an artist is to listen and understand the community in which the piece is being made, and then and then I interpret it in a new way for that information to become accessible. So even though you might walk by the same thing every day, then I might highlight that, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, I didn't realize that was in my space. And so I feel like part of the artist's role is to provide a new way to see a community just from another angle, and an exciting and visually accessible angle.
Oh, yeah.
So the other thing too, kind of, you made me think of something else, is with these sort of like weekly activations and stuff, and it's also, you know, for an artist, we get to provide mediums also for the public to express themselves. And I think that that's a really important component in terms of building community, because then the public feels seen and heard in a variety of ways.
What do you think are some of the most important ingredients in making in successful placemaking for an art installation? So what are some of those key things?
Sure. Well, I think first and foremost, I think the public and public art is really important. So ensuring that you have an artist that's selected with a public in mind, and that you're engaging the public in the artist selection process. And also really having a good site is really key, one that, you know, people are going to be able to see and experience very readily, and it's accessible. But also, if you're talking on behalf of a city like I am, is really having a strong support system internally for that artist to best do their work, so they have a platform in which they're supported. And that can either be in the form of a good budget, a good project manager, and good public policy.
Now, you mentioned the right space. How does the city of Santa Clara determine whether they're, what spaces they're going to utilize for that?
Well, the city of San Jose, we typically look at public realm projects, so everything that's public art is publicly accessible. We tend to utilize works that are city-owned or city right-of-way. Additionally, what we look at are, kind of where's the there? Where's the sense of opportunity? Is there another development that's going on, and in conjunction with this project? Is there a new library, a new community center? Is it a downtown cultural facility? Is it at a major intersection? So we want to definitely put it in highly visible public locations.
A lot to consider in that. Thank you. So any other things that anyone wanted to add on, important ingredients for successful placemaking? So Marie, did you have any? Yeah. It's okay. Yeah. Well, we can move on, because this can kind of tail on to that, is what are some of the lessons that you've learned, or what to avoid, because that's always one, and what not to do.
I can speak to that, yeah. I think that it's important to start with a really big vision, and I think that that's really key. What I think we should avoid is aiming for that big vision right away, and to start with smaller, minimum viable projects to test out the big vision in a variety of ways and get feedback. And so when they're a smaller scale, of course, it's less resources, and the ability to turn something around on a smaller scale is a lot easier versus this giant project that you now are working with and are like, oh no, it's too late, we've spent all this money, we're doing it, but it kind of sucks. So that's just a little answer.
So I have a phrase for that. It's called small steps with radical intent. All right, so that might be a way to approach it. Why don't you speak, and I can speak to this afterwards.
Okay. When we envisioned what was going to happen, say, in our sculpture garden or outside, we have a mission statement, so we had to just decide what our core values were before we thought about any artists in particular. So it was more of a who are we and what's important, and so something that was important to us in these selections was the opportunity to provide educational moments and connections to what happens in the learning process at Santa Clara University, and having a direct connection to the art, so that it would be always like a mini field trip. We're just outside, and we can talk about that and bring the artist in and say we use the same tools, or we think about things this way. So the educational tie-in and the idea of having a diverse perspective. So we made a list, and then we started looking at artists after that.
That's really key. I think two key lessons is, or insights is, public art is the people's art collection. So it's like your museum collection is just outside. So I think it's really important for people to have a sense of ownership and really embrace and be excited about what's in the public realm. I think also concurrent with that, though, the other insight is that there's not a one-size-fits-all for artworks. People are going to have they're coming from a different position, they're coming from a different place, they have another aesthetic value. So I would say to any city that's looking to advance or enhance its public art is, don't try to play to pleasing everybody. I think that's really important, that the civic dialogue and the civic discourse associated with public art is as important, if not more important, to the work itself. So it's the act of engagement, it's the act of sort of having a conversation with people about civic values. And I think that's what's so wonderful and exciting about public art, because it really is a lightning rod for discussion.
Well, and it would seem that without that public engagement, that's when you would have more criticism. So have there been any, I guess, what have you found most effective to bring in that engagement? What kind of tools?
For us in the city of San Jose, with every single public art project, we have something called a public art core team, which is comprised of community members, key stakeholders surrounding that project. They're either from the neighborhood or they have a stake in the process. We also have arts professionals engaged, and then people that are from the neighborhood and or from our arts commission. And they follow and they steward the project at every stage, from artist selection to design development to final conceptual design to installation, and then they're there as part of the celebration of when the work's installed.
Now, at the university, is it a similar process? And you had talked a little bit about it, but then involving students and professors and staff?
It's starting to open up now. There were some restrictions about the sculpture garden that we just opened in terms of connection to the building and the donor. So we have a university-wide committee, and it's like our baby steps. So as we think what might be there, I think the idea of temporary projects and also events which are open to everybody, and students and faculty, and everybody contributes or attends those kinds of events. Similar to, actually, we have an event tonight at the Day Sase Museum, which is college night, and there'll be a lot of students there from 7 to 10 tonight. So having these annual events happen. So we've just started that in our new building, but some things happen. It's a private institution, so that there are different ways that decisions get made. But the idea of having diversity in the collection and accessibility to provide a range of experiences as you go through the campus is something that's really coming to light in the recent selections. I also want to add that the San Jose's public art program is like a model program that many other cities look to the city of San Jose and how they do it, because they all their steps are in place and they come out with really fantastic projects.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Well, and then and that kind of segues into the next one, that with the city of Santa Clara, what can they do if they're looking and to employ art as to be successful? I guess, what are some of the things you had mentioned? Obviously, bringing the public in. What other kind of policies, regulations? I mean, what other things can you kind of recommend to the city that they could, as they start to look at this?
I'll start. So I would recommend looking at a twofold policy that leverages both public and private investment. I would recommend a % for art policy against city capital improvement projects, and that makes sure that every public investment includes a high quality design and includes an artist at the table. And I would say that having an artist at the table is much more than about having the work in the built environments. It's having the artist's voice as part of the process, which is equally important. And so looking at the artist as being a colleague to the other design professionals and the other people shaping the project. I would also recommend a policy for private development, public art in private development, and that would essentially leverage the city's investment and also ensure that any new private development going on in the city of Santa Clara would also have high quality design. And the city can think about what its thresholds are. I'm not talking about, somebody's doing an add-on to the garage. I'm really looking at, commercial development and what are sort of the thresholds for that. And that can be something that you can do some analysis around, but it really is critical because your CIP projects are going to ebb and flow according to, cycles. And so having a private development policy that's a partner policy will help to ensure that you have sustainability for public art and leverage both sides of the coin.
Do you want anything else to add?
I'm just thinking about, in terms of public projects, there's the life of the project as well, and thinking of how that project can be maintained. For example, if there's an app that controls lights, then as the software of your phone changes, like how can that app grow? So thinking about the long-range needs of the project are something that need to be considered in a budget and also in a good relationship with the artist that invents the project.
And Marie, did you want to touch on that too from the artist's perspective with these projects that you've done? What kind of would be helpful to the city? And also mentioning, Carrie kind of touched on this, she touched on this too, is also about new developments and how the art can play a role in that. So if you want to kind of add on, anything to add on to that?
Yeah, I would say, I guess, making the permitting process as easy as possible. It's just been one of the experiences that we've run into difficulty with time and again in the city of San Francisco. And so, I mean, every city is different, but in the city of San Francisco, the real estate there is divided up in a very complicated way. And so permitting can be difficult. It can be challenging, and it can take a long time. And so to see more public art, I think, to make the process just a lot easier for those who are interested in participating and creating it.
Yeah, and I would just say, we're talking about, in addition to, public art, also events and different types of activation elements. So removing barriers to activation is a key priority of ours all the time. And that's everything from facilitating permits to really making sure that the cost for city services stay as low as possible. So that would be also suggestions I would have for another city.
So does your office then work with the rest of the city to kind of navigate that for these projects and events, or to kind of keep that?
Absolutely. We consider ourselves facilitative rather than regulatory. Even though we have a regulatory function, we strive really, really hard to say yes to everything and to facilitate a way, and to also thinking about what are the policies in place that we can deregulate so we can get out of the way so that events and placemaking can happen in a more organic way.
It's really important because you can get really bogged down with that. So
we're trying to go from red tape to pink tape.
Ooh, I like that. All right, so does the audience have any questions? And what I'll do is, since you have the cordless, I'm going to kind of switch it out, and we'll use the cord.
All caught up here. Hi. Could you tell me if you were involved in the local color kind of pop-up place in downtown San Jose? I've visited. I think it's a fantastic idea.
I wish I could take some credit, but absolutely not. I was not involved, other than I was a cheerleader on the side. That was actually a project that an organization called the Exhibition District led, and it's a fabulous idea. For those of you that don't know, there was a vacant Ross store that had been vacant for maybe a year and a half, and a wonderful nonprofit organization that has got great relationships went in, took it over, and now you go there and you can see exhibitions, you can have classes, you can see mural making. It's really cool. It's a lot of fun. So I'm glad you've been there. I agree with you.
So there was a question about how the city could help to facilitate. And one of the questions that I have is, resident artists you talked about, and having the list of artists and the type of artwork that is in place. If Santa Clara doesn't have that experience, how would we go about basically building up that brain trust that is at the table, that's able to basically look at each one of these sites that come up? And I don't know if, I believe San Jose and a number of the other participating agencies have resident artists with the list of all the artists that have the different types of art. And is that something that we really need to look at? That's one question. And then the other question is with regards to regulatory, with regards to specifically the temporary type of work, the insurance and paperwork that goes with it in those public spaces. If it's the city initiating it, the city might be able to cover the insurance. But I know that for artwork, you have specific requirements so that it's not a hazard for children. It doesn't have different edges and stuff. So that's a lot of that brain trust that exists. And maybe if you could talk about those two issues.
So I can talk about building up a list of artists that are available or qualified to make those projects. And major cities have programs where they have an open call, and then they have a professional panel that may or may not include arts commissioners from that city. And artists submit their portfolio and answer a series of questions, and then they're generally rated. And then from this rated list, they might pull artists for different projects, or you've been pre-approved for a qualified pool, so that when we have a project in this way, we'll ask the public who they want. They might choose 5 people, you might be one of them, and then it would go on from there. So initiating a pre-qualified pool is one of the steps that happens in many cities.
And then also, in addition to that, we use a service called CAFE, and it's a service of the Western States Art Federation, also known as WESTAF. So you might want to reach out to WESTAF and see if you can get into their pool. And then what we do is every time we have an open call, we utilize it, we go through CAFE. So CAFE has really become a national model, so I would recommend that you enroll there. And then in addition, you had a question about insurance. And yeah, absolutely, insurance is important, because when you incite things in the public realm, you're sort of opening yourself up in terms of liability, whether it's design or different ways that people could potentially be harmed. So, having good engineering is really important for any project, whether it's temporary or permanent, and then ensuring that the artist has liability insurance. We ask for coverage with every artist that we enter into contract with. So it's definitely, part of the cost of doing business, and, every artist needs to be paid for their work. And so I would consider it part of the cost of your doing business when you receive an honoraria, and making sure you're building that in to your project budget.
Thank you very much. This has been a fantastic introduction to this topic. I had a question that spans from the first presentation to the third, and hopefully everybody can speak to this. The vision that the third presentation, where we talked about the singularity of the artist creating something and then displaying that to the world, is that's what people have thought of art for generations. And then the discussions of the images that you showed from San Francisco was really a participatory world. When you're thinking about outdoor art, both of those are inspiring. How do you lead to one or the other? The singular artist creating just a work of beauty, and then the whole community coming together to do something really spectacular. I don't know if there's thoughts on how best to lead those conversations. Are they two different things, or can they be all in the same?
Start with Marie. Thanks. So I'm sorry, are you asking how do you choose which path? Okay, got it. Oh, shit. Oh, sorry. Well, I guess thanks, by the way, for letting me go first. Honestly, I just started doing things and let that energy and flow dictate what I was doing in the moment. And really, instead of intentionally planning, I kind of did the reverse and did the 20/20 hindsight and went, oh, what have I been doing? There's the story that I can piece through all the things that I've been doing. I know a lot of other people don't work that way, and they might set the intention out first, but that's how I've kind of ended up where I'm at.
I have a question for you. Would you consider yourself a social practice artist?
Yes.
Yeah, will you maybe explain that? Because there's a kind of a new type of art making that's about process, and
Yeah.
maybe that would be a good explanation.
Sure. Well, so that's one of the type of, I guess, title that I identify with. So there's social practice artists, and it's basically someone who engages the community specifically to co-create experiences and artworks together. And so I do that as a creative placemaker as well. I like to use that title as well because I do it in the public realm, in public spaces. I think not all social practice artists do it in public spaces. So that's kind of where I merge the two.
So I sometimes have social practice as part of my work, or an engagement with a public. There's a performance aspect to some of my pieces that involves giving fake art history lectures, and then people ask questions about it. So I think each artist is different, and all of those might make it onto your pre-qualified pool. So there might be artists who specifically engage with social justice or social practice through their work in a way that's open to the community, and there may be other artists that are just like really strong artists, and this is the kind of painting I do, and this is it, and they might also have a place in public art in a city. So there's like a full range, and personally I enjoy doing commissioned work because it forces me to think in ways and paths and consider things about the community or the space that I hadn't thought of before. Otherwise, I would just like hole up in my studio and keep doing the same thing. So for me, commissions are an opportunity to stretch my practice and grow. So I enjoy that. Whereas other artists might say, no, I just do my thing, and others might be open to a wide variety of new experiences. So there's the full range, and I think that there's still opportunities for artists to engage with the public in many different ways. So it's not like, you need all of them.
Any additional, you do have.
So thank you for coming. It's been very interesting to hear. And so I had a couple of thoughts. And one, like I told someone in the community about this session, and they were kind of made a comment like, oh, well, I mean, shouldn't that, kind of like, okay, other places have a natural cool factor, and those things happen, and I said, well, maybe we have an issue in Santa Clara, the their problem. So is there an issue, or do you see a problem with things that maybe happen organically versus having to create an environment where those things, kind of maybe to foster that? And also, most of the work, except you mentioned the fake art history lecture, a lot of it, and the dance, which I love the idea of, because that was one of the things that struck me 10 years ago when I was in China, in some of the smaller cities that we went to, even though it was still it was late, early spring, but it was still pretty cold in a lot of Chinese cities, and people would gather at night to ballroom dance and do all this stuff. At line dance, they were doing American line dancings, and it was just kind of interesting to see. So some of my thoughts are like, where does more structured performance play into this? And and in addition, what is is something lost if something isn't truly organic?
Great questions. I was in China and I saw some of those public dances too, and it was really delightful. But to your question in terms of organic versus sort of providing a policy or a framework, I think you need both. I think, as I mentioned, it's sort of removing barriers to activation are really important so that it can become organic. But also you need policy, and you have to make that a priority. And you also have to have strategic investments in the cultural community. So that means investments in artists, that's investments in events, and ensuring that they can happen, because these things do require resources. So if a community does want to commit to this, they need to invest and also have a public policy framework for which artists can be successful or the creative community can be successful. So I would say it's a yes and response.
Okay.
As we're considering the closed-off pedestrian area outside of the Art and Art History building, one of the things we're thinking about is just flexibility. Like, could this nook be a place with a meditation bench or a sculpture or some kind of interactive virtual augmented reality thing happening? Or would this, so that we try to anticipate many different kinds of experiences and hope that what we design is flexible enough, because if you target a space to do only one thing and it doesn't work out, then that would be like a tragic mistake for the community. So the idea of having many flexible opportunities, how can art, performance arts, social practice, many different kinds of things exist in that space, I think then you can take advantage of scheduling and having different things happen and having that space become very active, except rather than active only once in a while to a very select group.
So I think that organic programming is an important end result in terms of the momentum of building everything up around that. But I do think, to everyone's point, it's really important to have and set the intention for actual programming that's put on by the city to kind of show what can be done in the space, to kind of build the imagination in the other organizations, local organizations that might want to use the space. So it's just kind of leading by example, and I think that that's how a lot of organic programming comes about. So I think you definitely need both.
Actually, can I ask one? Just sort of following up on that, as you've looked around Santa Clara or you live here, do we have places in our community now that sort of cry out for some kind of art intervention that you've seen? Or, because I thought that was part of where you were headed a little bit with that question too, is this, can Santa Clara do these sorts of things?
I think we're all sitting in a building right here that could play to that with several acres surrounding us, and we already have some public, we have sculpture out here, but so I think there's a lot of opportunity. So I obviously have that being here at the Triton, having that self-interest, but I think just around the cities you've got 3 wonderful libraries, right? You've got a lot of public parks, but I think there's just a lot of, but I also have 2 residents of Santa Clara, right? So please add in where you think that.
At the spot. I do see a lot of potential. I think there's a lot of spaces, like there's aspects to the Triton that I still haven't realized yet. Like sometimes I'll come for something, I'm like, whoa, I didn't know they had that kind of space here at the Triton. And so that's where strategic support of programming and not just of having to build a new space can also advance the arts community and share those experiences more readily. So it might be that there's just not enough money to support the proper programming in the spaces that we have as a starting point.
I would just say, I would look at interstitial space where you don't have to create new infrastructure and just look at, where are people going naturally? So think near SCU, by the stadium is key, trails, things like that. But, things that are happening between buildings.
So I'm a new resident to Santa Clara. I moved here in July, so I'm still learning all the spaces, so I might turn the question around to the audience in a minute here. But just to what Jill was saying, like there's a lot of beautiful public parks, the library, that I think could benefit even more from public programming or public art. And also, yeah, kind of to your point, Carrie, too, like where are the people already going? What kind of programming is already happening? And kind of building off of that momentum instead of starting from scratch. So maybe like even the farmers market, starting there, we know people are going there. We know that that's like a weekly beat. Like we could start something there perhaps. But yeah, to turn the question back around to the audience members, where do you think we could do some creative interventions?
So we actually already have one tiny piece of completely improvisational, as far as I can tell, art. On the corner of Benton and Scott, there is a little, it's not even a park, I think it's a water district, water pump station or something like that, with a chain link fence that doesn't actually fence anything off that I can tell. It's just sort of there. And somebody has done a tiny bit of yarn bombing. And every time I go past there, I look to make sure it's still there. Because it's been there for a year or two and it's getting a bit faded. But that is one of the places that we could, I think, invest a tiny bit and get a great deal out of, is places like that, and that's definitely what would classify as an interstitial space. One of the other, I ride my bicycle a lot, as many in this room already know, and the San Jose has done an excellent job of the Guadalupe River Trail and all of the artwork that is built in along that. The Santa Clara trail that goes along San Tomas Aquino Creek is my daily commute. The interpretive signs that are supposed to tell you what birds you're seeing and things that, which are not really artwork at all, are some of them are faded and decayed to the point of, I couldn't tell you whether they were about birds or not. So I think there's a huge opportunity there. There are these sort of semicircular places where the trail starts and ends, that there should be a there, and there isn't. It's kind of, what is this space for? There is some artwork. There's concrete reliefs in the underpasses, but there's not a lot of color there. There's just sort of the generic brown park signs with the map. And I think we could, there again, I think a relatively modest investment could make a very big difference.
So one last question, I think.
Right. So I'll be the skeptic in the room on this. I know Marie, we've known each other a long time, and the hurdle I always find with these really amazing installations is actually countering the busyness of life, getting out of the car, and taking the time to be present. Which kind of goes against everything it takes during the middle of your life, and you have, many kids and a job and so on. So how do you get over that hurdle of like activation or engagement especially when everyone's in their cars and you just don't see or touch these great things you're doing? So comments on that.
Well, I would say you want to scope the project relative to the site. So if you're looking at an intersection that's mostly vehicular, you want to do something that people are going to be able to engage with inside their cars. So it's really, if you're in a park, it's more going to be more pedestrian oriented. People do, take their kids, people still use parks. But I think you're right, is, thinking about what's the right type and scope of project relative to the site and what you're trying to achieve in terms of the goals for that particular place.
And so the natural pedestrian areas seem totally right, so we're creating and expanding one that the public will use through the campus property. And so, and it's also a place where a lot of people might sit to study and things like that. So there's like a university community that might use a space in a different way. And so we think about that when we're trying to decide what might happen in the space. But also some people are just going to be walking very quickly through the space. And so it'd be great if some things were of a scale where you could take them in and you don't have to stop. But if you had the time, you could stop, or you want to, or you have to, put down your laptop to check your email. Then you can, there's a bench there. What kind of bench is it? Is it just a utilitarian bench, or is that another opportunity for a local artist to make a statement or tell you something about the history of the culture that was here before? So we're trying to think of those useful spaces for people, but give them something more that might make those, moments of the quotidian a little bit more interesting or relaxing or inspiring.
Did any of you have any final comments, or would you like parting words of wisdom?
Well, I think kind of what I'm hearing too is thinking about scope, which I think is good. You can't start with some huge project out the gate, so I think that's important. And I think to your point of thinking of how is the space already being used before, because you're not going to retransform it into something else and spend money into something that goes by. So I think that's really important. So I think all of you have been so wonderful, and it's been so, I think, hopefully helpful for the audience. I've enjoyed listening to all the different viewpoints. So thank you so much for coming tonight.
And I just wanted to add on a little bit. I feel a little bit in awe of the amount of expertise and knowledge that's here, and I'm really appreciative as well for what you've shared with us. And I just wanted to announce as well that we're continuing this series on placemaking. We have another event next Thursday, and then the following 2 Thursdays as well. So our event next Thursday is on the topic of retail, commercial space, and how that can play a role in placemaking. That one will be at our City Council chambers at 7:30. So I hope that you can all join us and others as well. So thank you very much again for coming.
Thank you.